Breaking news, ICE and FBI expand investigation into a major network in Atlanta. Now let's get into the details.
What happens when one of the world's most violent cartels quietly embeds itself inside American suburbs behind minivans, school pickups, and the illusion of ordinary family life? That question struck Georgia like a lightning bolt when federal agents stormed homes across Atlanta's bedroom communities, uncovering a hidden drug pipeline that investigators now believe stretched far beyond state lines. Before sunrise, quiet cul-de-sacs flashed blue and red doors splintered, and agents poured into residences that neighbors swore were occupied by nothing more dangerous than parents and children. Yet beneath that calm surface, authorities found a machine built for distribution, money flow, and survival, one tied to the Jalisco New Generation cartel, better known as CJNG. The raid unfolded during a climate of heightened national security scrutiny, with President Donald Trump vocal about transnational crime and renewed federal pressure on border infiltration. U.S. agencies have intensified monitoring of cartel movements. According to Reuters and the BBC, CJNG has aggressively expanded its international footprint over the last decade, exploiting local networks from California to the Carolinas. Atlanta, positioned at the crossroads of I-20, I-75, and I-85, became an ideal target. The operation exposed a striking pattern. Cartel operatives were not hiding in remote compounds. They were nesting inside family apartments, weaving themselves into the daily rhythm of suburban America. The first breach revealed more than a stash house. Inside, investigators found over 500 pounds of tightly packaged drugs and 9 firearms, including weapons positioned for rapid use. The scale instantly signaled that this was no mid-level street crew. Federal officials told BBC and Guardian reporters that such quantities reflect a large coordinated supply chain, one managed with disciplined surveillance and strategic insulation from detection. In Stone Mountain, a second raid uncovered 300 pounds of methamphetamine stored just feet away from children's bedrooms. Neighbors told local reporters they were stunned. They saw birthday balloons, bicycles, and weekend barbecues, never the warning signs of CJNG infiltration. What made this discovery even more alarming, according to DW and Al Jazeera's coverage of cartel dynamics, is CJNG's known strategy: embed quietly fortify locations and move weight through communities that never suspect a thing. In Atlanta, the same blueprint appeared unmistakably. Agents reported welded interior grills, multi-angle camera systems, and properties wired for early warning surveillance. These tactics are typical of CJNG's U.S. outposts in Texas and California, where the organization replicates military-style perimeter control to protect shipments and cash. The raid also raised deeper questions about how far the cartel's tendrils extended. With Atlanta's massive airport and multi-state highways, the city offers unparalleled access for drug couriers rotating in and out, often staying under 90 days too briefly to establish patterns detectable by law enforcement. Trump administration officials have repeatedly cited concerns that cartels exploit precisely these logistical arteries, turning American infrastructure into unknowing facilitators of cross-border trafficking. But beyond geopolitics, the human impact sits heavy. In both Georgia locations, agents found children living inside fortified stash homes, kids who played on carpets under which bundles of narcotics were hidden. Neighbors now grapple with the realization that a cartel safe house operated just a few feet away from their front doors. The balance between security and civil freedom suddenly feels fragile. If such an operation can run unnoticed in middle-class neighborhoods, what else lies hidden? As the nation absorbs the magnitude of this discovery, one question looms over Georgia and the entire Southeast. If CJNG built one operational cell behind the facade of suburban normalcy, how many more remain invisible, quietly expanding beneath America's most familiar streets? How does a cartel hide an international drug pipeline inside the daily life of American families? And why did it work for so long? That question became impossible to ignore once investigators realized that CJNG operatives were deliberately embedding themselves behind children family routines and the rhythm of ordinary suburban neighborhoods. The scenes uncovered in Georgia were not the stereotypical images of drug dens or fortified compounds portrayed in movies. Instead, agents found toddlers' toys, school backpacks, and family calendars hanging beside surveillance monitors. According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, 2 young children were living inside homes stacked with hundreds of pounds of methamphetamine vacuum-sealed packages and weapons staged for quick access. Federal reporters at Reuters and the BBC have long documented CJNG's reliance on family camouflage, a tactic designed to minimize suspicion, reduce police encounters, and blend seamlessly with local communities. In North Georgia, this strategy appeared executed with chilling precision. Neighbors in Stone Mountain described the occupants as a typical family with 2 kids, recalling cookouts, friendly greetings, and quiet evenings. No one suspected that behind the living room drywall walls had been reinforced and stacks of narcotics were hidden under flooring. Authorities found the same setup in an Indigo apartment complex where 700 pounds of meth were stored in an environment indistinguishable from any middle-class home. To parents walking their children to the school bus, nothing looked out of place. But inside, GBI agents discovered a fortified surveillance system and drugs arranged for rapid distribution and operation that mimicked cartel logistics deep inside Mexico. This masking strategy has been observed before. According to DW and The Guardian's reporting on transnational crime cartels, increasingly use families and children to create soft visual profiles, avoiding attention from neighbors, landlords, and even patrol officers. Criminal networks understand that a house with bicycles outside draws fewer questions than one with covered windows and constant foot traffic. CJNG in particular is known for assigning operatives to pose as family units to secure rental agreements, anchor stash locations, and lower law enforcement visibility. But in Georgia, the implications were even more disturbing. Agents found footage from internal surveillance feeds showing unknown individuals monitoring approach angles, noting law enforcement vehicles, and recording movements around the neighborhood. Real families, were unknowingly living inside a perimeter designed for cartel defense. The psychological burden of such proximity now weighs heavily on the community. Neighbors expressed fear of retribution. Some believe the cartel deliberately picked stable neighborhoods where residents would be too scared or too trusting to speak up. Others now question whether more children in the area lived under similar dangers without knowing. The situation illustrates a growing national dilemma. How can local communities remain open, trusting, and family-centered when transnational criminal groups exploit exactly those values to shield their operations under President Trump's renewed focus on domestic security and cartel suppression? Washington faces pressure to strengthen oversight without turning residential neighborhoods into zones of suspicion. According to recent Reuters and Al Jazeera analyses, this tension between freedom and surveillance defines America's new domestic security landscape. Georgia's raids show that the front line is no longer at the border. It is inside apartment complexes, suburban cul-de-sacs, and family neighborhoods that look calm until the moment agents breach the door. Now, a more haunting question remains. If cartels are willing to hide behind children to move product across America, what boundaries are they no longer afraid to cross, and how prepared is the United States to confront that evolution? What does it mean when a cartel builds a multi-county network so quietly that it takes months of intelligence gathering just to map its outline? That question became central to Georgia's investigation as agents followed a trail stretching across Woodstock, Sandy Springs, Vine City, and Metro Atlanta, 3 counties, multiple stash houses, and one interconnected system threaded together with military-style discipline. What first appeared to be scattered drug activity soon revealed itself as a synchronized infrastructure designed for volume secrecy and durability. Months before the raid, investigators noticed patterns, unusual vehicle rotation, short-stay visitors, and incoming shipments arriving at odd hours. Yet nothing about these properties screamed criminal enterprise. Only when the surveillance footage, financial transfers, and cross-county movements aligned did the full structure come into focus. The tipping point came when agents uncovered a fortified property in Vine City described internally as a surveillance hub. Inside, the GBI found welded interior grills, reinforced walls, and cameras covering every approach angle, a level of perimeter control more common in cartel safe houses along the US-Mexico border than in a residential American neighborhood. Every door, hallway, and window had eyes. Agents entering the home compared it to stepping into a monitored battlefield, not a typical Atlanta residence. According to The Guardian and DW's reporting on cartel operations, CJNG frequently installs layered surveillance to monitor police response times, civilian movement, and delivery cycles. Georgia's operation fit that model exactly. Additional raids expanded the picture. In Stone Mountain, agents found 300 pounds of methamphetamine in a house that neighbors believed belonged to a quiet family with children. In Woodstock and Sandy Springs' additional locations carried large loads, suggesting a synchronized distribution calendar. By the time the coordinated breaches occurred, investigators realized they were dismantling a pipeline that had been operating in plain sight, one calibrated to take advantage of Georgia's geography. Atlanta's placement at the crossroads of I-20, I-75, and I-85 gave the cartel extraordinary reach east into the Carolinas, north into Tennessee and Ohio, west into Alabama, and straight down toward Florida. What stunned analysts following the case, including national security experts interviewed by Reuters and Al Jazeera, is how expertly this network mirrored CJNG's operations in Houston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The pattern was unmistakable: establish multiple low-profile stash houses, rotate courier teams every 60 to 90 days, use fortified nodes as central command posts, and spread product across several counties to reduce the impact of any single bust. In Georgia, the same template emerged with surgical precision. The Vine City House served as the primary hub, while Stone Mountain and Woodstock functioned as feeder points, each stocked, monitored, and coordinated to keep supply constantly moving. The presence of multiple counties created another strategic advantage: fragmentation. If a single location were compromised, the others could continue operating. The logistical design implied a chain of command reaching beyond Georgia's borders, and investigators know CJNG rarely assigns such real estate to low-level operatives. When the raids concluded, one agent described the system as a spider web with 3 centers each. Crucial, each replaceable, each designed to operate until discovered and then rebuilt elsewhere. But the most unsettling part for residents may be the proximity. These were not remote farm properties or warehouses on empty lots. They were next-door houses, townhomes, family apartments. Playgrounds and churches sat within walking distance of cartel nodes wired with counter-surveillance. That proximity raises a deeper national question, one echoed across BBC and DW coverage of similar cases. How does a country preserve openness and community trust when transnational cartels deliberately exploit the very structure of American suburbia? And now that this one network has collapsed, another question sits on the table. If the Atlanta raids dismantled only one slice of CJNG's regional footprint, how many other hidden nodes across the Southeast remain active, fortified, and waiting? What does it reveal about a criminal network when a single raid uncovers an arsenal capable of arming a small military unit? That's the question federal agents were forced to confront when they counted not only 9 firearms inside the Georgia stash houses, but weapons far beyond the scope of typical drug crews. According to the ATF and GBI, the seized cache included handguns, assault rifles, converted automatic rifles, and even a .50 caliber machine gun, a weapon normally associated with battlefield roles, not suburban neighborhoods. Authorities immediately recognized the implications. Whoever operated these houses wasn't simply protecting drugs, they were protecting a pipeline. ATF special agent in charge Benjamin Gibbons told reporters that the seized weapons represented over $250,000 in firepower, an amount consistent with cartel-level logistics rather than street-level criminality. Most of the rifles were the types easily converted to fully automatic configuration, a modification widely documented in Reuters and Defense News investigations on U.S.-Mexico weapons trafficking. These weapons investigators emphasized often begin their life cycles inside American gun stores, purchased legally, then moved illegally across states, or smuggled into Mexico. CJNG in particular is infamous for using U.S. weapons to fuel violence in Jalisco, Michoacan, and Guanajuato. Georgia's discovery now placed the same pattern directly inside an American suburb. The presence of these firearms also confirmed a long-standing intelligence concern, highlighted by The Guardian and Al Jazeera. Cartels do not simply move drugs. They export violence, intimidation, and paramilitary capability into the territories where they operate. A mini arsenal beside 500 pounds of narcotics indicates a group expecting confrontation, either from rival distributors or law enforcement. It also reveals a tactical mindset. The operators expected the possibility of an armed breach and prepared accordingly. Further investigation uncovered connections between the seized weapons and known trafficking routes documented in federal indictments. Some firearms were linked to earlier transactions involving American citizens who legally purchased weapons before selling them to cartel intermediaries. This exact pattern mirrors prior cases in Texas and Arizona, where weapons flowed south while narcotics flowed north, creating what national security analysts describe as a dual pipeline. In Georgia, the presence of a .50 caliber machine gun suggested far more than defensive posture. Such weapons are often used to disable vehicles, intimidate rivals, or challenge police in cartel-controlled regions of Mexico. Under President Trump's heightened focus on cartel activity, federal agencies have increased scrutiny of illegal weapons movement, particularly weapons that can be traced to high-violence organizations like CJNG. BBC and DW coverage emphasize that U.S. authorities view weapons trafficking as a strategic threat, not only because weapons fuel cartel violence abroad, but because they embolden cartel expansion inside American cities. The Georgia seizures now serve as a stark reminder that cartel militarization is not confined to border regions. It can take root anywhere in modest homes, quiet cul-de-sacs, and neighborhoods where families believe they are safe. Yet perhaps the most chilling aspect is the deliberate pairing of firepower with a family facade. The stash houses didn't look like bunkers. They looked like homes where children played, where neighbors exchanged greetings, where nothing seemed extraordinary. But behind reinforced doors and welded grills, CJNG had constructed strongholds. If the weapons discovered here represent only one cell's arsenal, how many more caches sit undetected across the southeast? As investigators trace serial numbers, financial routes, and trafficking patterns, a larger question emerges, one that extends beyond Georgia's borders. If cartels are willing to arm suburban safe houses with battlefield weapons, how long before one of these arsenals is used inside an American community, and what must be done now to prevent that future? How does a cartel decide which American city becomes its next command node, and why did Atlanta rise to the top of CJNG's expansion map? That question now defines the strategic analysis behind the Georgia raids. For investigators and security analysts, the answer is disturbingly clear. Geography, infrastructure, and vulnerability aligned perfectly. Atlanta is not just a major southern metropolis, it is a logistical super hub. 3 interstate arteries, I-20, I-75, and I-85 intersect there, forming a distribution triangle that reaches deep into the southeast and up the eastern seaboard. To a cartel built on speed and adaptability, this is a dream layout. From Atlanta, product can move north toward Tennessee and Ohio, east into the Carolinas, and Virginia west into Alabama and Mississippi, and south toward Florida, fast, quiet, and unnoticed. International analysts from Reuters, The Guardian, and DW have long reported that CJNG expands by exploiting cities positioned at major transportation junctions. The organization avoids high-profile border chaos and instead infiltrates inland cities where law enforcement is more accustomed to domestic crime than transnational networks. Atlanta offered exactly that mix: a busy, diverse population, dozens of smaller suburban crews vulnerable to takeover, and a sprawling metro area where rapid changes in traffic tendency and shipments rarely draw suspicion. Cartels thrive in complexity, and Atlanta's infrastructure provided the perfect camouflage. Then comes the airport. Hartsfield-Jackson, the busiest airport in the world, is a silent multiplier of cartel capability. Thousands of employees, hundreds of contractors rotating short-term workers, and constant movement make detection far more difficult. As cited in Reuters and BBC coverage of cartel infiltration patterns, CJNG frequently rotates couriers and operatives in cycles under 90 days, preventing them from establishing digital or behavioral footprints. Atlanta's airport allows precisely that short-term mobility with no pattern that stands out. Couriers can arrive, work a route, and disappear before anyone even registers their presence. Georgia's decentralized criminal landscape also played a role. Dozens of small, loosely organized distribution crews already operated across the metro region. None were large enough to resist a takeover. CJNG's method, documented by Al Jazeera and Guardian investigatory reporting, is to absorb fragmented groups, buy out their safe houses, seize their supply chains, and turn them into nodes of a larger machine. Investigators now believe that this is exactly what happened in Woodstock, Sandy Springs, and Vine City local networks were quietly folded into a broader CJNG pipeline without residents or even rival groups realizing it. The timeline is equally important. Over the past 2 years, as U.S. federal pressure intensified at the southern border under the Trump administration, major cartels shifted operations deeper into the interior. Defense News and Jane's analyses suggest that these organizations deliberately sought cities where federal scrutiny was lower, but infrastructure was high. Atlanta's mix of highways, rails, and air travel made it a strategic jackpot, mirroring patterns already established in Los Angeles and Houston. What made Georgia even more attractive is the state's unique blend of suburban sprawl and urban density. Cartels look for places where a fortified safe house can blend into a row of family homes without attracting immediate suspicion. Vine City, Stone Mountain, and Woodstock all offered that combination. A quiet cul-de-sac can conceal distribution activities for months, even years, before anyone notices a pattern. But no strategic advantage is ever static. The collapse of this multi-county network now forces federal agencies to consider the next question: if CJNG successfully replicated its Los Angeles and Houston model in Atlanta, what other southeastern cities, Charlotte, Birmingham, Jacksonville, are already being targeted for expansion? Under President Trump, federal operations are expected to intensify, but the challenge is clear. America's most vulnerable points may no longer be its borders, but its busiest, fastest growing inland cities. And so, the question grows heavier. If cartels see Atlanta not as a destination, but as a launch pad, how far has their reach already extended across the American Southeast? And how quickly can the United States adapt to a threat already inside its infrastructure? What happens when the faces behind a cartel's hidden empire finally come into focus, and what does it reveal about the network still operating beyond them? That moment arrived when agents traced the movements inside the Georgia safe houses and identified the individuals who kept CJNG's Atlanta cell running. Until the raids, the traffic looked like mid-level activity, quiet comings and goings, short-term renters, no overt threats. But once the names surfaced, investigators realized the operation was far more structured than anyone expected. The first arrest was Juvenal Farfan Arellano, 52, a Mexican national believed to be the pipeline link between CJNG contacts in Mexico and distributors across Georgia. His role, according to investigators, involved coordinating shipments, maintaining supply consistency across the 3 stash houses, and ensuring the fortified Vine City property stayed fully operational. His presence alone signaled that the operation was not freelance crime, it was cartel directed. Next was Omar Flores Mina, 33, also from Mexico. His arrest revealed the true depth of the operation. Flores Mina wasn't holding just marijuana. He held cocaine and methamphetamine, indicating involvement in multiple supply chains, an unmistakable sign of a high-level trafficking role. Multi-drug handlers are rarely independent actors. They are trusted operatives embedded within organizations to manage diversified, high-value product lines. For cartels like CJNG, such individuals act as mid-tier coordinators who connect local cells to international suppliers. The third arrest drew even greater attention. Jose Radila Maldonado, 29, an American citizen from Sandy Springs. Unlike the others, Maldonado blended into suburban life with ease. No unusual behavior, no overt criminal markers, nothing that identified him as part of a cartel structure. Yet investigators found him tied to distribution routes, financial flows, and movements among the stash houses. It was Maldonado, according to agents, who gave the operation its local face, enabling CJNG to blend seamlessly into Georgia's neighborhoods. All 3 men were taken to the Cherokee County Jail and charged under Georgia's RICO statute, a signal that authorities believed they were part of an organized criminal conspiracy rather than a loose network of small-time distributors. Their arrest, however, marked only the visible layer of a larger structure. According to Reuters and BBC's reporting on cartel hierarchy, CJNG cells are designed so no single arrest can collapse the entire operation. Responsibilities are divided, supply routes insulated, and communication lines shielded through intermediaries. Law enforcement now faces a more complex reality. If this cell operated at a high enough level to warrant fortified home surveillance networks and a weapons cache, including a .50 caliber machine gun, then the individuals arrested were fulfilling orders, never issuing them. Analysts from The Guardian and Al Jazeera note that CJNG rarely exposes its upper echelons. Regional operators, couriers, and stash house managers are intentionally positioned as replaceable assets. Behind them stand coordinators. Behind those coordinators stand lieutenants, and behind all of them sits Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes El Mencho, one of the most elusive cartel leaders in modern history. The GBI called these arrests only one phase of a much larger investigation. Phone records, financial trails, encrypted communications, and cross-border links are now being analyzed to determine how far CJNG's influence extends across the Southeast. What investigators uncovered in Georgia matches a pattern seen nationwide. When one CJNG cell falls, another rises to keep the pipeline alive. Cartels do not retreat, they recalibrate. For residents, the arrests raise a painful truth. If one CJNG cell lived quietly among families storing weapons beside children's toys and meth under floorboards, then trust in the safety of suburban life has been fundamentally shaken. Under President Trump's intensified crackdown on cartel activity, the question facing federal authorities now is not whether more cells exist, but where they are, how deeply embedded they have become, and how quickly they can be uprooted before violence erupts. And so the final question hangs over Georgia and the nation. If these 3 arrests exposed only the front line of CJNG's Southeast network, how far up the chain will investigators have to climb before the true architects of this operation finally come into view, and will the next cell be found before it has already replaced the one that fell? The Georgia raids exposed a CJNG operational cell embedded inside suburban neighborhoods, hidden behind the facade of ordinary families. Agents uncovered fortified homes wired with surveillance over 500 pounds of narcotics and a weapons cache, including assault rifles and a .50 caliber machine gun, evidence of a highly organized militarized cartel presence. Investigators traced movements across Woodstock, Sandy Springs, and Vine City, revealing a multi-county distribution network strategically positioned around Atlanta's major interstates and the world's busiest airport. These geographic advantages allowed CJNG to move narcotics across the Southeast while rotating operatives before detection. 3 men, 2 Mexican nationals, and 1 U.S. citizen were arrested under Georgia's RICO statute, confirming the operation's organizational depth. Yet authorities believe they represent only the visible layer of a much larger structure tied to El Mencho's CJNG hierarchy. The case has sparked national concern as President Trump intensifies federal action against transnational cartels. Analysts warn that CJNG's expansion pattern in Georgia mirrors earlier infiltrations in Houston and Los Angeles, raising fears of additional hidden cells across the Southeast. The core question now remains: if this was only one operational node, how many others are already active, and how quickly can the United States find them before they evolve into something far more dangerous?